My name is Stanley Browne, and I'm a World War II veteran. When World War II broke out, I was a citizen of Canada, and a young fellow graduated from high school, very ambitious to be into it, and of course my thought was Air Force. Young people always think of that. So I enlisted, or thought I did, went to Portland, and discovered after taking the full physical that they don't allow non-citizens really enlist. So I said, "You're drafting these people that come from Canada and other places?" "Oh yes, you can volunteer for the draft." So I ended up volunteering for the draft at 19 years old, and that was in October of '42. When we got down to Fort Dix, ready to ship out, they called out a number of us that were not citizens, swore us in, and we were naturalized all the same day. When we went into the induction center, they had the paper to fill out of your history. Being a young fellow from Aroostook County, of course, skiing had been one of my interests. So when I was in basic training in Alabama, they wanted to know if I wanted to volunteer to go to Colorado in winter areas, then skiing would be a part of it. Well, the thought was interesting, but here I was in Alabama in the fall, never had experienced a winter without cold and snow, and after all, they only asked you if you wanted to volunteer, so I said, no, I don't want to volunteer. I'm going to stay here where it's warm. About a week after I finished that training, I got sent to Fort Custer, Michigan. And of course, goes without saying, Michigan had plenty of winter. There I discovered that they were building up a supply of military police. So I became a member of the 794th Military Police Battalion, which was organized at that time when I got there. Shortly after that, we were loaded on several ships. I happened to get loaded onto an LST Navy. That was the landing ship that opened the doors in the front to let tanks and other vehicles out. Of course, we felt this isn't going to go anywhere, but maybe to maneuvers down the coast, because it doesn't look that seaworthy. We'd never seen one before. Little did we know that 26 days later, we discovered it could cross the ocean. And we ended up in North Africa. My company was assigned to the Port of Oran as the security for the facility. I did have the experience of at one point in Oran being bombed by the Germans. Those days our radar was fairly new. It turned out, as they told us, that a German bombing unit had kind of hooked on to the tail end of an American bombing unit coming back to North Africa. And apparently the radars didn't count too good, so they flew in and then peeled off and bombed the harbor, because this is where a lot of the freight work was going on. That kind of startled us, and we had to pick ourselves up and get out and help where we could. So there was incidents like that that would pop up unexpected. January, I'm thinking of 43, American troops had landed in Sicily and Italy. So when we were shipped over there, we landed in Naples. Got assigned to a place called Benevento, and from there stretched out various railroad stations. The Army had set up officers' candidate school, so I applied at Fontainebleau. Courses were abbreviated, and of course the war in Europe got over during that period. But the first day of our training was when we were informed that President Roosevelt had died. After I graduated, my first assignment was Potsdam, and discovered that we were actually going to be the staff setting up for the so-called Big Three conference, which would have been Churchill, now Harry Truman, and Stalin. It was in the Russian zone of the part of Berlin that we were in. We had to take all these American people that were going to be setting up for this conference into the Russian zone. That meant, I suppose, in their pre-planning, that the Russians had to know how many, what it would take, and to let them in, and they were very careful about that. It turned out that apparently someone who had given them an estimated count on the food services that we would need in there estimated a little short. When that count got through the Russian gate, they stopped. So they had to do some fast negotiating to get the rest of us in. But that's just a bit of humor in the way we had to deal with the Russians. They were very suspicious. After we got finished at Potsdam, I got assigned to the 2nd Armored immediately from my job there, and ended up finishing my service in the 2nd Armored Division. I came home from Europe 2 or 3 days before Thanksgiving. But those of us that were getting out at that time were put in the Army Inactive Reserve. So I didn't get discharged until after Korea. Supporting the cause was the thing to do.